They say hardship builds character, but they rarely speak about what it steals. They say growing up early makes someone strong, responsible, wise beyond their years. But no one asks what had to be buried for that wisdom to bloom. Some children do not slowly unfold like spring flowers. They harden like trees in winter. They learn silence before they learn safety. They learn to read the room before they learn to read books. And the world often applauds them. This is the quiet paradox. The child who becomes the adult too soon. The invisible weight placed on small shoulders. The silent epidemic of early responsibility, mistaken for maturity. What happens inside a person who never truly got to be a child? What parts of them had to disappear? And why does their strength sometimes feel so heavy? In this reflection, the myth of strong for your age will be gently unraveled. Let's begin. Some children laugh loudly. Some children run without looking back. And some children listen. They listen to the tone in a parent's voice, to the way a door closes, to the silence after an argument. While others are learning games, they are learning tension. While others are daydreaming, they are calculating. This is the child who felt older than their age, not because they wanted to be, but because something in the environment required it. Perhaps there was financial strain that turned dinner conversations into whispered worries. Perhaps there was emotional instability that made moods unpredictable, like sudden storms. Perhaps there was absence, physical or emotional, that left gaps too large for a child to ignore. And so the child adapted. They became observant, responsible, careful. People praised them, so mature, so helpful, so understanding. But maturity born from necessity is different from maturity born from time. One grows like a tree in open air, the other grows between cracks in concrete. Have you ever noticed how some children rarely ask for help, how they hesitate before expressing need, how they instinctively take care of others, even when no one asked them to? It does not come from superiority, it comes from vigilance. When safety feels uncertain, the nervous system sharpens. It scans for danger. It anticipates disappointment. It learns that being easy keeps the peace. And slowly, without announcement, childhood becomes a performance of stability. They become the mediator between arguing adults, the emotional support for a grieving parent, the silent sibling who doesn't add more stress. Their toys gather dust. Their questions remain unasked. Their tears are swallowed quickly, because somewhere inside, a quiet belief forms. If I am strong, everything will stay together. But strength at that age is rarely chosen. It is assigned. And what the world often sees as independence is sometimes a child who learned that dependence was unsafe. There is something deeply misunderstood about these children. They are not advanced. They are alert. They are not naturally detached. They are protecting themselves. They are not born self-sufficient. They were conditioned to be. Imagine carrying adult-level awareness in a small body. Imagine sensing the fragility of the household before understanding your own emotions. What happens to play when responsibility enters the room? What happens to innocence when survival becomes the priority? It does not disappear dramatically. It erodes quietly, like river sediment carried away grain by grain, and the child grows, but not freely. They grow with watchful eyes, with controlled expressions, with a maturity that feels both admirable and unbearably heavy. This is where the story begins, not with weakness, but with adaptation. Not with choice, but with necessity. And beneath the capable exterior, there is still a child who never stopped listening. Not all storms are loud. Some arrive quietly, in the form of unpredictability. A parent whose affection depends on their mood. A household where love feels conditional. A silence that lingers too long after conflict. Children are not meant to monitor stability. They are meant to trust it. But when safety is inconsistent, something subtle begins to shift. The nervous system does not wait for explanation. It does not ask whether the tension is temporary. It simply adapts. In homes where finances were fragile, a child may have overheard late-night worries about bills. In homes shaped by emotional neglect, a child may have learned that feelings were inconvenient. In homes touched by addiction, illness or absence, a child may have learned that stability could vanish without warning. And so they became steady, because someone had to be. This is how premature maturity often begins, not as ambition, but as compensation. When adults are overwhelmed, children feel it. Even when no one says a word, they notice the tight jaw, the shallow breathing, the tired eyes, and they adjust themselves accordingly. They speak less, they ask for less, they need less, at least on the surface. Inside, however, something more complicated unfolds. A child in an unpredictable environment develops a heightened awareness, a kind of emotional radar. They become experts at reading micro-expressions. They sense shifts in energy before words are spoken. This hyper-awareness feels like wisdom, but it is rooted in survival, because when safety is uncertain, predictability must be created internally. The child begins to believe that if they behave perfectly, nothing will collapse. If they stay calm, conflict will shrink. If they remain strong, the household will not break. This is not manipulation, it is protection. But protection at that age carries a cost. The body stores tension. The mind rehearses worst-case scenarios. Rest becomes difficult, because vigilance feels necessary. Even in moments of quiet, the nervous system does not fully relax. It waits. Have you ever met someone who cannot truly unwind, who feels uneasy when things are too calm, who anticipates disappointment, even during joy? Sometimes that pattern was born here, in early uncertainty, because when a child grows up walking on invisible eggshells, the floor never feels entirely solid again, and yet from the outside, they appear capable. They manage responsibilities effortlessly, they comfort others naturally, they seem composed, but composure is not the same as safety. It is the armor built when safety was fragile. What is rarely acknowledged is this: children should not have to stabilize their environment. They should not have to earn calm. They should not have to shrink to preserve peace. But when safety becomes unpredictable, adaptation becomes inevitable, and the child who once felt older than their age begins to carry something else, a quiet, persistent tension, not because they are anxious by nature, but because their early world taught them that vigilance equals survival. This is how maturity is forged in uncertainty, not through time, but through exposure. And beneath that steady exterior, the nervous system is still listening for the next storm. The human brain is remarkably intelligent, especially when it comes to survival. When a child grows up in uncertainty, the nervous system does not pause and reflect, it reorganizes. In safe environments, the developing brain learns through curiosity. It explores, it experiments, it plays. But in unstable environments, the brain learns through vigilance. Stress hormones like cortisol become frequent visitors. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes highly active. The body prepares not for exploration, but for protection. This is not weakness, it is adaptation. When unpredictability becomes routine, hypervigilance feels normal. The child becomes exceptionally attuned to tone shifts, body language, and subtle changes in atmosphere. They can sense tension before others notice it. Psychologists sometimes call this parentification, a role reversal where the child becomes the emotional caretaker. But for the child, it does not feel like a role, it feels like responsibility, and the brain reinforces it. Neural pathways strengthen around alertness, the stress response becomes efficient, the body learns to stay slightly on edge, even during calm. Over time, this shapes personality. The child appears mature, disciplined, self-contained, but internally, their system is calibrated for survival. Have you ever wondered why some adults struggle to relax, even when life becomes stable? Why they feel uneasy receiving help? Why vulnerability feels dangerous, even with safe people? It is not stubbornness, it is conditioning. When early life teaches that mistakes lead to chaos, perfection becomes protection. When early life teaches that emotions burden others, suppression becomes safety. When early life teaches that no one is coming to fix things, self-reliance becomes identity. The nervous system does not distinguish between past and present easily. If danger was once frequent, the body remembers. Even in adulthood, the heart may race during minor conflict. The mind may catastrophize small problems. The body may tense without clear reason, because somewhere deep within, the old programming whispers, "Stay ready." And yet, here is the quiet tragedy. The very adaptations that once kept a child safe can later create isolation. Hyperindependence makes asking for help feel unnatural. Emotional restraint makes intimacy complicated. Competence becomes a mask that hides exhaustion. This is the paradox of early maturity. The child survives by becoming strong, but the adult may struggle to feel safe enough to soften. None of this is accidental. The brain did exactly what it was designed to do. It protected. But protection, when extended too long, can become a cage. The nervous system that once guarded against storms may continue guarding long after the weather has changed. And beneath the capable, responsible exterior, there is a body still braced, a mind still scanning, a heart that learned caution before it learned ease. This is not a flaw in character. It is the imprint of adaptation, a system that matured too early, because it had to. There is a certain kind of strength that does not feel empowering. It feels heavy. From the outside it looks admirable, calm under pressure, reliable, unshakable. But inside it feels like holding a shield that can never be lowered. People who were forced to mature too early often carry this quiet armor into adulthood. They are the dependable ones, the problem solvers, the emotional anchors in chaotic rooms, and the world leans on them, because they rarely break. But what if they were never allowed to? When a child learns that vulnerability destabilizes the environment, they begin to associate softness with risk. Crying feels excessive, needing feels selfish, rest feels undeserved, so they master composure. They become the one others confide in, the one who stays rational, the one who absorbs tension without complaint. But armor, even when protective, restricts movement. It protects the heart, yes, but it also prevents it from breathing fully. Have you ever noticed how some people struggle to answer a simple question, "How are you?" They deflect, they minimize, they shift the focus, because admitting overwhelm feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. Underneath their competence often lives exhaustion, a fatigue not just of the body, but of constant emotional responsibility. They are strong in crisis, but alone in their quiet moments, and there is a loneliness in being the strong one. When others assume you can handle everything, they rarely ask if you should have to. When others admire your resilience, they may never notice your restraint. Strength becomes identity, and identity becomes obligation. The child who once stabilized the household grows into the adult who stabilizes every room. But who stabilizes them? This is the hidden cost of early maturity. They may struggle with intimacy because closeness requires exposure. They may struggle with delegation because trust was never fully safe. They may struggle with receiving care because giving care feels more natural. Armor does not disappear when danger passes. It stays, polished and reinforced. And sometimes, the person forgets what it feels like to exist without it, to cry without apology, to fail without fear of collapse, to rest without scanning for consequences. What looks like confidence may be control. What looks like independence may be guardedness. What looks like emotional stability may be suppression. And none of it is conscious manipulation. It is learned survival. But here is the quiet truth. No one can wear armor forever without feeling its weight. Eventually, the shield grows heavy. The shoulders ache. The heart longs to be held instead of holding everything together. And yet, lowering the armor feels terrifying. Because the last time it was down, something fell apart. This is the internal conflict. To remain strong feels lonely. To soften feels risky. And somewhere inside, the child who once stepped up is still waiting for permission to step down. There is a grief that rarely has a name. It is not the grief of losing someone. It is the grief of losing a version of yourself that never had the chance to exist. When childhood is shortened by responsibility, something subtle is left behind. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly. The sleepovers that never happened, the mistakes that were never allowed, the carefree laughter that felt inappropriate in serious rooms. Play becomes replaced by problem solving. Curiosity becomes replaced by caution. Imagination becomes replaced by realism. And at the time it feels necessary. But years later, a question may rise unexpectedly. What would I have been like if I had felt safe? This is the hidden mourning of early maturity. Because while others were discovering who they were, you were discovering how to cope. While others experimented with identity, you were stabilizing circumstances. And now, as an adult, there may be moments of quiet confusion. Why does fun sometimes feel unfamiliar? Why does rest feel unproductive? Why does vulnerability feel embarrassing instead of natural? It is not immaturity, it is unfamiliar territory. When a child learns that seriousness equals safety, lightness can feel irresponsible. When a child learns that mistakes have consequences beyond themselves, perfection becomes protection, and so adulthood may carry an undercurrent of pressure. Even when no one is demanding anything, there may be a lingering belief: if I stop holding everything together, something will fall apart. But what if that belief belongs to the past? Grief for a skipped childhood often surfaces indirectly, in sudden jealousy, when watching carefree families, in a tight chest during holidays, in unexpected tears during simple moments of joy. It can feel confusing, because on the surface, life may appear stable, yet something inside feels unfinished. The inner child was never allowed to stumble, never allowed to rebel safely, never allowed to be small, and so adulthood can feel like an extension of responsibility rather than a transition into freedom. This grief is rarely acknowledged by others. After all, being mature was praised, being strong was admired, but admiration does not erase loss. There is a quiet ache in realizing that survival came at a cost, that while resilience was gained, innocence was traded. And here lies a difficult truth. It is possible to be grateful for your strength and still grieve what it required. It is possible to honor your adaptability and still wish you had needed less of it. This grief does not make you ungrateful, it makes you human. Because childhood is not just a stage of life, it is a foundation. And when that foundation is built under pressure, the cracks may only become visible years later. Not as dramatic breakdowns, but as subtle longings, for softness, for ease, for a version of yourself that never had to grow up so quickly. There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, when something inside begins to question the armor. It may happen during exhaustion, or during a conflict that feels disproportionately heavy, or during a rare moment of stillness, where the body no longer wants to perform strength, and a quiet awareness emerges. I learned this to survive, not because it was your personality, not because you were born unbreakable, but because the environment required it. This realization can feel destabilizing. If strength was survival, who are you without it? If independence was protection, what happens when you no longer need to protect? The mind may resist this inquiry, because loosening old patterns feels unsafe. After all, hypervigilance once prevented chaos, control once reduced risk, composure once preserved peace. But over time, the nervous system begins to recognize something new. The storms are no longer constant. The responsibility is no longer yours alone. The room does not collapse when you exhale, and yet, the body may still brace. This is where awareness becomes powerful, not as a command to change, not as a demand to soften, but as a gentle noticing. The racing heart during small disagreements, the tension when asking for help, the discomfort when someone tries to care for you, instead of judgment. There is curiosity. This reaction once protected me, and with that recognition, something subtle shifts. The armor does not fall away instantly, it loosens. The nervous system, when given consistent safety, slowly recalibrates, not because it is forced to, but because it is allowed to. You begin to notice that mistakes do not cause collapse, that vulnerability does not always lead to abandonment, that rest does not equal danger. At first it feels unnatural, softness feels foreign, dependence feels risky, trust feels fragile, but awareness creates space between past and present. You are no longer the child stabilizing a fragile world, you are someone who survived it, and survival does not have to define every moment forward. There is something deeply human about this stage. It is not dramatic healing, it is not sudden transformation, it is quiet permission. Permission to feel tired, permission to not be the strongest person in the room, permission to receive instead of constantly giving. This realization is not about rejecting strength, it is about understanding its origin. When you see that your resilience was adaptive, not innate obligation, you begin to reclaim choice, and choice is different from compulsion. The child who once stepped up did so because they had to. The adult, however, can begin to step back, not in weakness, but in safety. And safety, when experienced consistently, becomes something entirely new, not something you create for others, but something you finally allow for yourself. Safety is a strange experience when it arrives late. For someone who was forced to mature too early, calm can feel unfamiliar, silence can feel suspicious, gentleness can feel undeserved. When the nervous system has lived in survival mode, peace does not immediately register as peace. It registers as uncertainty, because chaos was predictable, tension was expected, responsibility was constant. But safety is quiet, and quiet leaves space. Space for emotions that were postponed, space for needs that were minimized, space for the child who learned not to ask for anything. Learning to feel safe again is not dramatic, it is subtle. It begins with small recognitions. Noticing that someone stays when you express discomfort. Noticing that a mistake does not lead to rejection. Noticing that you can say "I'm tired" without everything collapsing. At first the body may resist, the shoulders remain tense, the breath stays shallow, the mind prepares for something to go wrong. This is not distrust of the present, it is memory. The nervous system is simply asking, is this real? And over time, with repeated evidence, it begins to believe it. Safety is not learned through logic, it is learned through experience, through consistent calm, through reliable presence, through boundaries that do not punish. This stage can feel vulnerable in an unexpected way. When armor loosens, sensitivity returns. Tears may surface more easily, anger may feel clearer, joy may feel unfamiliar, because beneath survival, there was always a full emotional landscape waiting. The child who once suppressed fear may now feel it. The child who once swallowed sadness may now release it. And this can feel overwhelming. But it is not regression, it is integration. You are not becoming weaker, you are becoming whole. Strength built from survival does not disappear, it transforms. It becomes discernment instead of hypervigilance, boundaries instead of walls, confidence instead of control. And slowly the belief begins to shift. I do not have to hold everything together. You begin to notice moments of softness that do not threaten stability. Laughing without scanning the room, resting without guilt, allowing someone else to take the lead. These moments may feel small, but they are profound, because for someone who matured too early, learning to feel safe is not about adding something new. It is about allowing what was once denied. Childhood was about survival. Adulthood can become about choice, and choice, when grounded in safety, feels lighter. The armor may still exist, but it no longer has to be worn at all times. You can place it down, even briefly, and in that briefness, something extraordinary happens. You feel, not as a protector, not as the strong one, but as a human being who no longer has to grow up alone. They say time heals all things, but time alone does not return what was skipped. The child who matured too early does not disappear. They adapt, they wait, they watch from within. Sometimes they appear in unexpected ways, in the sudden urge to withdraw when overwhelmed, in the instinct to fix everyone's problems before your own, in the quiet ache when you see children laughing freely. They are not a weakness, they are a memory of the moment responsibility arrived too soon. But here is something rarely spoken. That child is not frozen in the past. They are alive within the present, still sensitive, still perceptive, still capable of wonder. They were never broken. They were simply recruited into adulthood before they were ready. And yet, despite everything, they survived. There is something profoundly resilient about a child who learns to stabilize a fragile world, something intelligent in the way they adapted, something remarkable in how they endured. But resilience does not cancel longing. Beneath the competence, there may still be a quiet wish to be cared for without earning it, to rest without justifying it, to be small without consequences. These wishes are not immaturity, they are humanity. Healing, in this context, is not about becoming softer overnight. It is about recognizing that strength and tenderness can coexist. You can be capable and still need comfort. You can be responsible and still crave playfulness. You can be strong and still want to be held. The child within does not ask to rewrite the past. They ask to be acknowledged, to be seen not only for their resilience, but for what it cost them. And perhaps this is the final truth. Growing up too early shaped you, but it does not have to confine you. The vigilance that once protected you can become awareness. The independence that once isolated you can become self-trust. The maturity that once felt heavy can become grounded wisdom.
You are not defined by the age at which you became strong. You are defined by the fact that you survived, and that you are still capable of feeling. If something quiet inside you was touched while listening to this reflection, if parts of this story felt uncomfortably familiar, you are not alone in that experience. There are many who learned to grow up before they were ready, many who carry invisible strength, many who are only now realizing they no longer have to. If you'd like to stay connected to reflections like this, a space where the hidden corners of the human heart are explored gently and without judgment, you're welcome to remain here. And if you feel comfortable sharing, you may write your thoughts below, not because you have to explain yourself, but because your words might quietly help someone else feel seen. Take a slow breath. You deserved safety then. You deserve it now.